There's no shortage of headlines about AI adoption, but behind the hype, organizations are struggling with something far more complex. How do leaders make the right strategic decisions? How do teams skill up to keep up with this AI revolution? Today, I'm joined by Emma G. Muller and Allegra Guinan, who are founders of the company Lumiera. And through their AI Leadership Accelerator, they help leaders and organizations navigate these challenges. They're here to share what works and what doesn't when it comes to adopting AI the right way. So without further ado, let's dive in and meet our guests. Emma and Allegra, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here, and thank you for taking the time to do this. How about you introduce yourselves, tell us about your background, and how Lumiera came about?
Sure. So my name is Emma Muller, and I'm the CEO together with Allegra, who is the CTO. The two of us met a few years ago, and when we realized how deep the both of us have been going in the AI space from different perspectives, but also recognizing that we're seeing the same problems in the industry and with leadership, we decided to do something together. So we started Lumiera with the purpose of essentially supporting leaders in making better decisions around AI, which means that you have a more layered approach to AI decisions, but also figuring out how you actually get return on investment from the technology as such.
That's awesome. How about you, Allegra?
Yes, so as Emma mentioned, we met a few years ago. I think it's almost 5 at this point. I am coming from a background in technical leadership, portfolio management for US-based tech companies. And so the perspective that I had that is slightly different from Emma's was that of internal engineering teams and engineering leaders and how they were thinking about adopting this technology and what they were building internally across different size enterprises. There are many challenges within that. And so when I realized that Emma was as deep in this space from a governance and strategic background, there was so much to cover between us both. So yeah, that's how we came together.
That's fantastic. And Emma, you and I met as a part of the Perplexity AI Business Fellowship, which is like this buzzing community of builders and people just experimenting with AI. And it's fascinating with both of your backgrounds, how they're different in the sense of your own experiences, but coming together, you guys bring in a cohesive point of view around AI and AI adoption in organizations. To begin, first of all, I read the Lumiera Loop and I quite enjoy it. You guys cover interesting topics at depth, which is hard to do. And so kudos on that. We'll link the newsletter below in the video description as well. So recently there was this MIT Nanda study around AI adoption in organizations. And the claim was 95% of AI pilots are failing. And in one of your newsletter editions in August 28th, you kind of broke down that report and you scrutinize it. After reading that, it kind of opened my mind to the fact that we should be questioning these statistics. We should be going a little deeper beneath the surface to really understand what's going on. And that particular headline wasn't necessarily a complete representation of what's going on in the AI adoption space, right? So why do you think headlines like this resonate with CEOs or executives, even when the data behind them is weak?
I think there are a couple of reasons why. One, big numbers get attention. So even just the way that it's phrased, of course, you put the heavier number up front. But also, a lot of people are struggling and do have a lot of challenges with AI. So it can be a validating point as well. If you don't read any deeper, if you don't really do any additional research or break down these kinds of reports, it can be a self-fulfilling headliner for an organization. And if you are in this camp where you're not seeing the exact success that you had imagined maybe a couple of years ago as an organization, this can be something that makes you feel like, all right, well, we're not behind because everybody else is also failing, which isn't obviously the whole truth.
And to add to that as well, I would say that the whole narrative around AI transformation, AI adoption is quite polarized. In a way that doesn't benefit anyone, really. It might be of interest for an industry or for certain individuals to use this narrative to create fear or to support their own opinions or their own type of work. But what we're seeing too much of is either the naivety around AI, that it's easy to get return on investment, that all companies should implement it at all levels, or the exact opposite, where we have a lot of fear, a lot of skepticism. And to be honest, none of those two narratives are accurately reflecting what is actually going on and what creates real value and what good decisions should look like for companies.
You guys mentioned two really important points. Allegra, you mentioned it's so human to sort of find validation in something that, it's almost like confirmation bias. You're struggling, if somebody is struggling with AI adoption, you read this paper, wow, MIT says everybody else is struggling too. And you start to believe it. First of all, it was very hard for me to find the actual report. And there was a lot of conversation about the report, and I was able to dig through LinkedIn and find it. And if I'm not wrong, they interviewed about 52 people or 52 different sort of companies, which is not representative. It's not even critical mass of all the organizations running with AI. Coming back to the same, so the human aspect of it, just confirmation bias, is so strong here. And also we're kind of in this era where there's so much hype. Everybody's an expert. There's so much content and, advice on social media about this stuff. It's hard to figure out what's noise and what's signal. So I think that also plays into these big numbers and big statistics that come out from reputed, credible sources as well. In your newsletter, which talks about the MIT Nanda report, you would describe adoption as moving through kind of three phases: individual augmentation, process integration, and capability platforms. How should one measure success here, and success at each stage?
Yeah, I think as you move through, of course, there will be many definitions of success. So I'm not sure there could be one, but being able to define at each level is extremely important, and realizing that you can move through phases and all of them can be successful, right? So if you are already at this third stage of capability platforms and you're really enabling your entire workforce at a fundamental level, you're looking at engagement and adoption, and you've now upskilled and you've leveled up your whole team for future use cases as well. Maybe you have reusable components, like you're not starting from scratch every time. You really have this strong base. And that definition of success would be quite different from when you have exploration, when you have a lot of individual use cases. And there you might be focusing on different signals, which also, back to your point just briefly on separating the noise from signals, looking internally and seeing how people are reacting in your workforce, your peers as maybe executives or those that are reporting to you or individual contributors, like seeing how they're interacting with the whole idea of AI internally, and what's coming up, what's still challenging, where there's resistance. Like those are the signals you should be operating with, of course, with some more industry-wide ones, but focusing more on that rather than external signals is extremely important.
Right. What are your thoughts on this, Emma?
My thoughts on it is that one of the main things that we're missing out on in the industry, and when we're talking with leaders and when we're advising companies on how to set up a concrete roadmap and a concrete strategy for how to get real value out of AI, is that the value of AI is squiggly. So we don't fully know, and you cannot know as a leader where the biggest value will come out, because you will only see that if your whole organization starts working on it. If you have experts internally that knows their day-to-day, they know their use cases, they know their processes, they are also able to check the data. They're able to check when something is not turning out as planned. And if you have that, and if you build that capability in your organization, you're far more likely to succeed. What does that mean, though? It means that we need to have executives that are setting the standards to have that type of culture internally. It also means that it's very important to recognize failure and to learn from failure as well, as much as looking at the success cases, of course, so that they can spread throughout the organization, so that you don't keep these business cases isolated.
Yeah. Yeah. And the three phases, individual augmentation, which is kind of team and individual skilling, process integration, which is super important, and then capability, which is the tech part of it. I spent a decade with cloud adoption. So I started as an on-prem engineer. If anybody knows, people used to run their own servers and data centers. And I was the guy who would go in and run risk assessment across 500-600 servers. Then when the cloud came, it was my turn to go figure out how to get these businesses to adopt the cloud. And we followed a three-prong approach. This is defined in ITIL, which is an IT process framework. People, process, technology. If you want to get transformative ROI from any investment you make for your business, for technology, you need to have people, process, and technology, which is exactly the same phases. So a lot of my strategy work with AI adoption, and clients are like, okay, we invested X amount of money into Copilot or ChatGPT, but we don't know if everybody's using it. And my question is, what have you invested into process and people? Because if you're not investing in all three, it will not work. And like you guys mentioned, all these data points which you have to be mindful of are human. They're not technology related necessarily. So it's very hard to see that ROI, and people struggle with it, which is probably why it becomes harder in the long run. And the other thing I say, if an organization has already adopted a cloud, they have the playbook. Go back to that same playbook. You did something right. And start looking at it with an AI lens. And I think there will be some answers you will find. Taking this a little further. Now, Allegra, you did an MLOps community talk on designing voice agents for trust. And in the same theme of what we're talking about, you mentioned that adoption isn't just technical. It's about culture. It's about governance. And I think culture is super important, especially with AI. Emma, you mentioned the value is squiggly because it's not deterministic. It can work in different ways. And different people will find different ways to work with it. So a space for experimentation, a culture of experimentation where failures are awarded is very important. So where are leaders sort of most underprepared when they're steering this AI adoption and integration through their culture of the organization?
I think what you just mentioned around missing sort of two of the legs of that three-leg approach there of people, process, technology, like over-investing in one and under-investing in the other two. Usually it's the people side of things is a huge miss. And then going back to defining success, having a very narrow view and definition of return on investment is something that we definitely see as a major challenge here for leaders. So when we think about that report and people are thinking about if AI has a high success rate or not, what that actually means varies by the use case and by the organization and what their priorities are. And so if you just have this narrow thinking that you will have a monetary return that is some exponential amount based on what you put in X amount of time, that is too narrow for AI because of all of the different variations it can take, because it involves so much change management and it's all very new. There's a lot of space that you need for exploration. And when you're building the capabilities and the foundations and the technology itself, there are a lot of things that can be successful, like on the infrastructure side, that are not seeing those immediate monetary returns, but are still very successful and are, again, enabling your entire organization to move faster time to production, less security vulnerabilities, higher engagement, whatever it may be. And that might not look like immediate monetary return. And so people have to move beyond that definition in order to see the value of AI and to really understand it and plan around it. So I think that is really one of the major hurdles right now and why we're seeing reports like the one you mentioned with these high failure rates.
Right.
Yeah, and just because we have high failure rates or because there are a lot of organizations right now that are not able to bring their POC phase to a value that benefits the whole organization, it's quite clear that technology as such is valuable and that it's substantial and that it can do a lot of, it can add a lot of different value in a lot of different ways. There is a whole other side to it as well, which does relate to the actual business value and related to what Allegra also mentioned here. Are you actually looking at which problems you're trying to solve?
Right.
That is a big one.
Yeah.
That is so simple that it's easy to miss out on.
Yeah.
Just go back to basics, look at what is the mission and vision of your company or of your team? Can you clearly define which problem you're trying to solve? And by the way, this is it's very often not a problem that the tech side of your organization is going to be able to understand and define by themselves. You need to have cross-functional teams and cross-functional collaboration in order to make that happen and in order to build that actual value.
Right. And I think in the previous question, you mentioned something about having the right business stakeholders and leaders really lean in, meaning champions. So if you have cross-functional champions, you can figure out how things integrate in terms of data, in terms of tech, and in terms of people skills as well. I think that's very important. Now, you guys just wrapped up your first cohort of the AI Leadership Accelerator. So I'm very curious sort of what the themes you see come out of it. One of the themes I see in individuals and companies is there is this perspective that this game-changing technology can do a lot for you without you having to ask properly or put in a lot of work, which means because it's AI, it's intelligent, it's expected to give you the right answer all the time. Is that a perception you see in organizations as well, where because, they've invested money into technology, to a technology which is supposed to change the world, is there an expectation or perception that, hey, this should just do this for me? Why do I have to think so hard to integrate into my processes or actually think about the basic problems? Do you kind of see that theme?
I actually see sort of more of something else, which is a hesitance and lack of clarity on how to take action. So it's less of this assumption that AI can solve everything. I think there is an understanding that it's a very powerful technology. It is general purpose. Obviously, there are use cases out there that sort of circulate to various people and maybe specific to their industry, so they can see the potential. But I do feel like in the conversations we're having with a lot of leaders, there is sort of this like, I don't know how to take the first steps forward, or I'm in these conversations and I'm not sure how to navigate them strategically. And there's less of this short-term, immediate thinking, you might assume, actually. And of course, there is that. It does exist, and we see that. But for sure, as we went through this program, there is a layer of hesitance around moving with AI because it's high risk, because there are a lot of different stakeholders, because there is a realization that it does take a lot of work, especially now that it's been a few years since this hype sort of kicked off. There was a lot of exploration and failure and investment. And so now we're sort of leveling out a bit, and people are realizing that they have a block on how to move forward successfully. So it is a bit different, actually.
I also see a double narrative here, sort of a contrast for individuals that creates confusion, and that is this deep value that this technology is supposed to have, but then also the lack of knowledge and the lack of recognizing how much you have to learn and adapt and just build on your knowledge day by day by just using these different tools. Also, something that we keep on coming back to is, what is the definition of AI, and where do you find these different alternative use cases of AI in your organization? We are working a lot with fintech and finance leaders. And especially in fintech, we have machine learning being a very powerful and a super good technology that has a lot of use cases there. That is not the same as an LLM app like ChatGPT, for example. And when you have leaders that, to the max extent of trying this technology, they've been trying to prompt a couple of things in ChatGPT. And ChatGPT sort of works like a mirror, so it only reflects back to them the quality of their own prompts, essentially. Then you get this huge just shift and contrast between what the technology is supposed to do and what it's doing for you as an individual. And that also creates confusion, and that is what we also help leaders with, right? To get to know themselves, get to know the technology, and understand these different nuances of what AI is.
You know, it's so fascinating to think about that. One is how probabilistic it is. It's fuzzy. The value is fuzzy. And you mentioned fintech and machine learning. Machine learning has been there in fintech for years now. And in my last job at Microsoft, I was helping financial services companies and capital market companies build data and AI solutions on Microsoft's platform, which was a lot of machine learning stuff, very expensive solutions to build and to get the right value out of. Now you have generative AI, which is in everybody's hands, and it has this promise of capability, which it can do a lot. But it becomes important to understand what it actually is and how you can guide it right. And I think that is an aspect which comes back to learning, right? And experimenting, and how you have to learn in a different way. You have to experiment with it to learn. And also, as it is changing, we all know how fast AI is moving, right? There's a new tool and model to do the same thing that there was last week. So it's hard for people to sort of grasp that. I think that creates a lot of anxiety and hesitation, like Allegra, you mentioned, of how to kind of go about it. Speaking of learning, which is sort of my area, my whole mission with Rift is to enable people and figure out how you can help people learn continuously. Because I am convinced that traditional modes of learning are not going to be able to provide the skills needed to be successful with AI because of the pace of the revolution, one. Second, just the probabilistic aspect of it, how you need to adapt as it adapts. And that's a very difficult thing to grasp for people because we're used to learning in the ways that we always have. And if you saw, I think it was last week, the Associated Press article where Demis Hassabis, who's the CEO of DeepMind, he argued that the most important skill in the AI world is meta learning, which is learning how to learn. And that is something I am very passionate about. And that struck me because that's my central mission with Rift. So from your vantage point and the themes you experience in your AI leadership accelerator, are leaders treating skilling as an ongoing process, or is it sort of a phased or one-time exercise with courses or what have you?
I would say that we're lucky enough to surround ourselves with people and to attract leaders that are learners. Otherwise, they would not be working with us in the way that they do. And they are professional, they are ambitious, and they are recognizing not only the value of the technology and recognizing that they need to move now in order to not miss out and to still remain competitive on the market. But actually that there's an attitude around it that is also super important. And I completely agree with you that traditional ways of learning is not going to be enough. But I do think that one of the main factors that we are going to see that is going to distinguish companies in the market from now on is how good of a learning culture you have internally. And that also starts with the executives. So you need to set the bar high and you need to remain curious. And that is also why one of the core values that we have in Lumiera is intellectual generosity. You should be sharing your learnings. You should learn from each other's different perspectives. And by doing so, you can create immense value also in your company.
That's a very good point. Working with other companies that are sort of going through the AI adoption process, there's a little experiment we tried with one of clients I worked with was having leaders share even their failed experiments in like team meetings and have a 5-minute slot. Like if you got a hands-on, which is bi-weekly or monthly, try having a 5-minute slot where the leaders actually share, hey, I tried this with AI, doesn't really work. Anybody got some ideas? It just changes the conversation. It brings in so much of the human aspect. And then people would actually come in, hey, no, I think I tried this in a different way, or there's a different tool. And then it sort of creates this natural space for having this conversation and also sets the tone. Experimentation is good. Failure is okay because AI is going to give you 2 different answers if you ask it the same thing on different days sometimes. But that's just the nature of it. And understanding that, I think, is very important. Acknowledging it, accepting it, and figuring out how to create a culture of continuous learning, I think, is super important. Now, when we connect all of these different themes that were going on, it's been a couple of years since ChatGPT came about. And now the hype cycle is kind of tapering off, where there's a lot of reality that is setting in, where people are rolling up their sleeves to actually figure out how to work with this. But there's so many different themes that are connected in a way. One, the hype around this, all of these data or research points that come out, which are not necessarily backed by real information, blind spots in leadership, struggles with skilling. There's a certain sort of theme that emerges. There's a lot of overwhelm overwhelm associated with it, right? For leaders as well as individual people. So if you were advising leaders, like you mentioned, of sort of how to manage that overwhelm, how to create a very simple sort of theme of how to approach this and help their employees approach it as well, what would be the first step you'd ask them to take?
Yeah, I mean, there are many that you can take, but one of the first ones that we start with actually in the accelerator is for leaders to define their North Star. And this can be done at an individual level or also, within an organization. But the idea here is understanding what kind of leader you want to be and that you are already, and being able to think back to what brought you into your current seniority. Like you mentioned, if you've already gone through cloud, maybe you've already led a massive transformation. What do you want to bring with you into this next phase? So that at the highest level, you can be a representation of how you want the entire organization to move forward. So starting there is a really good place, and establishing for yourself as an individual what principles you want to drive you, what position you take on AI, so that when you go into rooms, you're really standing with something rather than being confused or maybe more reactive than you would like to be because you feel under pressure. When you really understand this about yourself as a leader, you're making a lot more informed decisions because you're confident in how you're moving. And at the individual level, that works. And then as you expand that to your entire organization, it also works very effectively in moving everybody forward.
And this is also where conversations with your team and with other executives in other companies comes in as so important, because what we're seeing is that we have specific narratives for specific industries. We're seeing different types of hype cycles and narratives around the technology as such, what you should prioritize and not. But to be honest, as Allegra is saying, if you know yourself and if you know your company, and then if you add on to that, you actually get to know what is not just happening in your own little environment, but you're breaking out of that so that you're recognizing the different nuances and the different narratives around it. You become more independent and you make a lot better decisions. And that is also where this cohort format is so incredibly powerful, because you get to meet other senior leaders with their perspectives, with their learnings, with their specific organizational approaches as well, with their use cases, with their successes, with their failures. And once you start having that conversation and you start putting words on your own fears, your own strengths, the problems that you're looking to solve, then it becomes clear.
Yeah, will emerge.
So that is definitely where everyone should start, and they should go back to it as well every now and then.
It's that kind of self-reflection is so important. And then if you want to lead by example, you have to start with self-reflection. And it is fascinating to me how this technology is really forcing us to think what it means to be human and what it really means to be human in this mix. How do we understand how to interact with this technology? And we're just at the beginning, all the tools are very clunky. They have a promise of, solving a lot of problems for us. But right now we're at the beginning where, most of the tools can do a lot of things, but you really have to understand how to extract that value, which means going back to reflecting of really understanding where your vulnerabilities are and understanding how you can sort of take the first step in leading by example. And it's the same with people as well. Individuals who I speak with, so many individuals that feel like they're falling behind because they feel like they're not competitive enough in the market because they're struggling to skill up with AI. Or there's also a generational divide. I think a lot of people are not talking about that because the technology native generation, Gen Z and younger, they're just going to catch on to this very quickly because it's natural. Well, I dare to say my age and my generation, I think I always say that I am the last analog generation. And that's true. And it's hard for people to accept and adapt with this newfangled thing. So people feel a lot of anxiety that they're falling behind. And it's all just sort of going back to the basics, like both of you mentioned, understanding what the mission is, what you want, how you want to solve that problem for yourself, and then taking the first step. Because then once you start going on that journey, I think it starts revealing. itself. Now, another thread from the total overwhelm of the hype and the craziness that is going on. How do you guys keep up? What are your sort of modes of understanding what is happening in the AI market? You write a very insightful newsletter. That means you're trying to keep up with all the craziness with it. What's your favorite, I don't know, tools or modes of keeping up with what's going on with the AI?
Yeah, I think we probably have some slight different ones, but the newsletter is a huge forcing function for us to
Yeah.
do a lot of research and look into a lot of different sources and
Yeah.
not always be stuck in the same one because we're always changing the topic. It could be a more technical concept, it could be more societal, geopolitical. And so
Yeah.
because we do have this variance and we are very comprehensive in what we choose to write about, we do need to look at a vast pool of sources every single week, which is great for us because we learn a lot. For myself, I do have a lot of podcasts that I listen to,
Okay.
some more technical ones because I try to stay on top of technical developments and the application layer and understanding the challenges that people are facing, especially within machine learning and AI at the engineering level.
Right.
So there are a few of those, and then some more like societal, very human-focused podcasts as well to see the greater impact that this technology is having.
Wow. What about you, Emma?
Yeah, we have some similarities, Allegra and I, but also some differences. I would absolutely, to start with, just recommend spending time with human beings that has a different type of knowledge than you have, because
Yeah.
again, AI is going to sort of reflect that back to you, and there's so
Yeah.
much happening that is impossible for us to keep track of everything ourselves. It's a
Yeah.
matter of community. It's a matter of speaking to people that has a different type of expertise and different types of interests than yourself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that would be the first thing. Producing instead of consuming. So
Yeah.
start using the tools, write things, make videos. In whatever way you can create something
Yeah.
that is also helping you to channel all of this input and all of this buzz and all of this information that we're getting. So that is also a big one. And
Yeah.
then for us, I mean, we're lucky enough to talk with investors on a regular basis when we're
Yeah.
advising them. We're lucky enough to have super brilliant clients and leaders in these cohorts that also keep on bringing relevant information to us. And we get to go to conferences and talk about these things with people that are equally engaged as us. So all of these things helps us, but I would actually say that starting with recognizing that we cannot keep up with everything is a very good
Yes.
thing, and then
Yes.
stick to some of the things that matters to you. AI is a general purpose technology, so look more to use it and to apply it to what
Yeah.
you're interested in than only focusing on the technological developments as such also.
Very great points. Couple of themes that you guys mentioned. Allegra, you said your newsletter is a forcing function. That's how I feel about Rift completely, because it's a forcing function for me to learn what tools are the best to build what I'm trying to build, or what's going on in the market, what themes I should be focusing on when I write our weekly newsletter, or even anything I write about. And Allegra, you sort of mentioned talking to people, right? Understanding other people's perspective. Purely the only reason why I started the YouTube channel is to talk to people like you, so I can learn, what's going on in the other, in different parts of the AI market, and learn from people like you and others of what's working, what's not. And the goal is to sort of create that space for conversation, is where we can just talk about what it means to be human and how we can make sense of it and help each other grow as individuals, and also help businesses grow, because there is massive potential that AI can bring to it. The other thing I would say is, because of there's so much going on, the overwhelm is real, and you really need to find what works for you. And everyone asks me, I would get random text messages from friends and clients saying, hey, dude, should I use Replit or Cursor, or what's the best? I'm like, doesn't matter. You pick one. They're all the same. They have the same capabilities. If there's one that works better for you, just pick one, stick with it, you'll figure it out. And I get text messages, should I pay for Perplexity Pro or should I pay for ChatGPT? Also doesn't matter. Pick one and stick with it, and find what works for you, and try to mold it to where you develop your own processes that you can adapt. And that's important. That's new. That's not something we've done in the past, because our relationship to technology has been You know what the technology is expected to do, and it should do it. But this time is very different. It's very probabilistic. This is fascinating conversation. We could keep talking about these threads, and I love the fact that we're just talking about being human. It's not about the tools. It's not about tech. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I thank you both for taking the time to do this. And I'm sure in the future we'll have another conversation to see where we are as things advance. So as a takeaway, what I kind of want to end on is AI adoption isn't really about the tools. It's about choices that leaders make. It's about choices that individuals make. And it's about creating a space for experimentation. Experimentation is good. Experimentation is what leads to continuous learning, and it invokes curiosity. I think curiosity is a big factor. If we can figure out how to scale curiosity in this world, I think we'll all be fine with AI and we'll get the best outcomes that we need. For everyone listening, we'll have links to Lumiera Loop, their newsletter, and their AI Leadership Accelerator program in the video description. Thank you so much for being here again. And for our viewers, give us a like and subscribe because we've got a lot more cool content coming. And until next time, stay curious and keep asking.